Welcome back to Tempting Fate Tours. John normally does the voiceovers, and I think we can all agree that's probably for the best. But we're talking about the mechanical work, and I tend to be the one that turns the wrenches here, so here we are. The first time I got to see it was in the garage, and our first job was to put air in the tires. Miraculously, 3 of the 4 tires actually held air. Yeah, that was enough. I was very surprised. That got us going, and I thought to myself, let's see if this engine is free, because we were not able to confirm that the engine was not seized. I couldn't use the hand crank because the front plate blocked the hole. I fell back to one of my favorite tricks, is put the car in 4th gear and pulled it forward just by hand. Unfortunately, I was not getting good results. The engine was not turning. That made me quite nervous. But hey, we were already in this far, so too late to stop now. We got the car loaded up. John and I started evaluating next steps. We needed a new battery. We needed fuel filter, fuel line, clamps, coolant, oil. Unfortunately, the 803cc engine has a unique oil filter, not something you can pick up except for at specialists. But we got a drain pan and some Marvel mystery oil because that's what everyone falls back on. Next day.
So one of the traditions of Tempting Fate Tours is that we go to breakfast at diners.
We removed the wheels and tires, loaded them into the Volkswagen. We had sourced a set of Redesteens, and John went out to get those mounted and to secure a set of spark plugs. And while John was gone, I broke out the wrenches and got started on the rest. Is the engine free? First thing was to remove that front license plate, get the hand crank on there, and see if we couldn't get it to turn. I had visions of this project coming to a screeching halt immediately, but it seemed to move a little bit, and there were what I thought were sticky and squeaky kind of belt sounds. So I loosened up the adjuster on the generator, pulled the belt off, and lo and behold, so the engine was free, which is great news, but the water pump was seized, which is terrible news because the 803cc A-Series engine doesn't share a water pump with any of the other A-Series engines. We had to source one from Australia, and that just meant that we were not going to get this running with a functioning cooling system. But at this point, we don't have any choice but to keep going because we're already here and committed. Still waiting for John. I pulled out the old battery and I cleaned the engine bay up a little bit, and things looked surprisingly good. There's a small hole into the passenger compartment under the battery, but behind the battery, what did we find but the original rotodip plug, intact. Pull off the oil bath air filter, check the carburetor was free and not stuck, the choke was free and functioning, and the piston inside the vacuum chamber. Next up, we filled the radiator with coolant, and just to see what leaked, even though it doesn't have a functioning system, and the coolant in the system will help keep it cool while we let it run for a little bit so it does not overheat quickly and do any damage. We did a quick inspection of the distributor and the ignition system, used some sandpaper to file down the points a bit and clean up any corrosion. Checked the cap, wires, rotor, and the coil, and everything seemed okay. Got our fingers crossed on that. And then John arrived back with the tires and spark plugs.
135 14s for the record.
It was December, so we ran out of light pretty early, but managed to put the new battery in, see what we got. Hoping for the best, and
ignition light came on, wipers are dead. On the other hand, the lights appear to be good.
All of the lights worked except for one license plate, which, amusingly, the one light that wasn't working turned back on. There's no wipers, the blower motor doesn't work, and the dome light doesn't work. Even the turn signals worked, although the relay is a little bit wonky. Despite decades of Lucas jokes, the electrical system in this car was all but perfect.
All right.
So we went home to the hotel, got some rest, and came back the next day.
A large, greasy breakfast makes all sorts of things much better.
We attacked the fuel system. The old fuel pump was not working. After a brief effort to see if we could get it going, we just put the new one in. Unfortunately, the fuel line from the tank is blocked with just residue varnish from the old fuel that must have been in there. Pulled apart the carb, pulled residue out of the fuel bowl, installed a new needle valve, a few new gaskets, put some fuel in the fuel bowl. It would run off that until it ran out. And then, in what is a signature move for me, I had reassembled everything when I realized I had left the spring out of the vacuum chamber and had to take everything back apart. Now that we're at this position, it was time to spin the engine over, and it would allow the engine to build up a prime, pump that new fresh oil through the oil system, help lubricate it before we actually tried to start the engine. But without any plugs in it, it would push any of the remaining Marble Mystery Oil out of the cylinders. Hopefully smoke when it started, but also just getting that out of the way. It confirmed spark as John was operating the starter. I was able to see that there was spark coming out of the plug wire, so that was a good sign. The moment of truth, we threw the plugs in, see if she'll run. Much to our joy, it fired right up. Much to our horror, and then proceeded to rev near redline. Thankfully, I was able to frantically reach for the throttle and close it. Remember how I said not to forget to hook up the throttle return spring? Forgot to hook up the throttle return spring. Woo! And then after that, it ran shockingly well for a car that had not run in 50 plus years. And so that night, John and I went out and celebrated with some quite good Mexican food and came back the next day to see where we could go. We didn't have time to do the brakes, and we didn't have time to deal with the water pump, but we showed up in the morning, found a fantastic vintage Texaco map of Los Angeles in the interior. As a side, we actually cleaned up the fill cap for the oil. It's just so very, very neat to have. We had a lot of work cut out for us. This may be the most ill-advised video I've ever filmed, but we're really happy with how far we were able to get, and also just still really happy with the condition of the car because it is just remarkably